This clay tutorial will show you everything you need to know to make a clay rattle or maraca using kiln-fired clay and watercolor paint at the end. You could try this with air-dried clay, but keep in mind kiln-fired clay gets hard as a dinner plate, so you would want to completely dry your beads first if you're using air-dried clay. This tutorial is perfect for beginners because all you need to do is make 2 pinch pots, put a little bit of clay on the inside, and then practice some texture and carving skills. So this is a great tutorial for beginners. It's also so much fun because it is perfect for the season of fall. And if you wanted, you could turn this into a jack-o'-lantern, or you could turn your rattle into any shape that you find interesting. I'll put my materials in the description box, but you really don't need a lot. If you have your hands and some sort of scoring or carving tool like a shish kebab stick, that's really all you need. If you love learning about art, hit that subscribe button so you never miss one of my weekly art tutorials. The first step is making your pinch pots. I'm starting with a ball of clay that I wedge a couple of times in my hands just to make sure it's consistent and doesn't have air pockets. Once it's pretty round, I roll it on the table, or you can do this in your hand, to create a sphere or a 3-dimensional circle. Now I'm only going to show you how to do this once, so what I should do if I want my pinch pots the same size, make sure to either measure or just kind of eyeball that you're using the same amount of clay. Give your ball of clay a thumbs up, and you're going to push your thumb down until your knuckle disappears. You're going to leave your thumb inside and you're going to pinch and turn, pinch and turn, pinch and turn until you open your clay up into a bowl-like shape. If you want a more detailed explanation, click the link above and I'll walk you through a little bit slower how to perfect your pinch pot. Repeat these steps to make your second pinch pot. So we're making a rattle, a musical instrument, a maraca. And to do that, you're going to roll tiny clay beads in your hand of various sizes. Depending on the size of your pinch pot, you don't want to overcrowd it because then the beads won't be able to make music. And if you only put a couple, it's going to kind of have a boring sound to it. So I usually stick to about 5 to 7. I think I do about 7 for this one. And you can see there are multiple sizes and shapes. Then get a tissue, toilet paper, paper towels, and you're going to wrap each individual one. So this is the part that's really important because if you don't wrap them, they're going to just stick to the inside of the clay, and then when you fire it, there's a chance that they're just going to stick there and not break loose. So if you wrap them in toilet paper, they're going to dry out, but they're going to not stick to the walls of your pinch pot. It works every time, I promise. So wrap each one and then just lay them inside like it's a nest. Once you have the beads wrapped and inside, it's time to take both of your pinch pots and connect them. As you can see, my pinch pot to the left, it's not my best work, but it will do because I'm going to be doing a lot of smoothing and blending after I attach these pinch pots together. The technique I'm using is score, slip, and blend. And what you see me doing with my shish kebab stick is putting score marks inside the clay. You could use a fork to do this, but I have all these like giant toothpick shish kebab sticks that I'm using. And the whole point is to open up the clay so that you can put slip in between and it fuses the 2 pieces of clay together. I always use slip when attaching 2 pieces of clay, and slip is simply clay and water and acts like the glue. So you can see it's getting in your score marks. And then I'm using a tool to blend, that's always the final step, the 2 pieces together. So I always use slip. You could get away with using water, some teachers use vinegar, but for me, I've only used slip, so I'm sticking to it. Because my 2 pinch pots are a little bit dry, I'm using the clay tool to blend the seams, but you could definitely use your finger. I'm using the rib tool here, so use what you have on hand. The rib tool is this large wooden tool. I'm using my thumb to blend. So basically you're just trying to make sure that both of your pinch pots are fused together. And you can see it's made a very round, sphere-like shape. So depending on what you're going for, you could really obsess with the smoothing here. So what I love about this project is at this point, you have a blank canvas. It is going to be a rattle or a musical instrument no matter what, but I want to celebrate the season and I'm going to make mine into a pumpkin. So think creatively. what is round that you could turn this into? It could be an emoji. You could score slip and blend some cat ears on there. Really, if it's round, it could be the Death Star. Anything in your imagination. So for my pumpkin, I'm simply using the edge of my slip brush and I'm carving in indentions so it's starting to look more like a pumpkin. A pumpkin is not perfectly round. So although my shape is pretty round for now, I'm going to spend a lot of time smoothing and making it the shape that I would like. It looks a little bit like a beach ball. So there's a variety of tools that you can use, and always my hands are one of the most frequent tools I use for blending. So I'm trying to make the lines that I carved look a little bit more natural, and of course I want to have a stem for my pumpkin. So I'm rolling just a very squatty looking coil, and then I'm going to pull it to have a point on the end, kind of like a carrot. So remember, anytime you attach two pieces of clay, I always score, slip, and blend, especially if the clay is at different levels of dryness. So I'm scratching in my score marks. I do this on the top, and I do this on the stem and on the pinch pot itself. And this is gonna make it not look like a beach ball, but look like a pumpkin. I'm keeping the shape of mine pretty simple, and I'm blending it with the same wooden tool I used before, but you can use your fingers. So if you look up images of a pumpkin, they have really cool like curly stems that make these like swirly leaves. I'm keeping mine pretty simple, but once I know it's attached, I'm gonna go back and kind of pull it and try and make it a curly pumpkin shape. Again, you could keep this simple and leave it pretty much like this. My next step is I'm using a tool to carve the indentions in even more. I don't want it to look like I just drew the lines of my pumpkin. I want it to look really three-dimensional. This is called a loop or a ribbon tool, and you need to be careful with it because once you get a little carving happy, you can't get that clay back. So I'm being very careful. I am carving out with the loop or ribbon tool, carving out the segment, but I'm trying not to poke a hole in my pumpkin. And it really is starting to come to life. Once I'm happy with the 3D effect of my pumpkin, I'm going in with a sponge. And this is just kind of, I don't want to say a cheat way, it's just an easy way to blend. So because everything in my pumpkin is pretty much smooth except the stem, once I have my indentions in there, I'm using the sponge to blend and to smooth. So if you don't have a sponge, you can use your fingers. You could use a paintbrush. So there's a lot of different ways to use clay. And this project you can do simply with a shish kebab stick. Like, you don't need a lot of fancy tools, but play around with the ones that you might have. So you can see I kind of twisted my stem a little bit, and I always go back and kind of rework. So clay can be, I don't want to say ugly, but if you just kind of leave it the way it is, it can look, I will say, unrefined. And so there's always a balance of smoothing and going back in and making your textures or carved areas stand out. So once you have it in there, there's just kind of a balance of figuring out how smooth you want things to be, how much you want the lines to stand out. And if you don't have the ribbon tool, you could use the end of a paintbrush to carve into your pumpkin. So you can see the stem's a little heavy, so it's starting to look less round and a little squattier, which is perfect because that is the effect I'm going for. And I'm trying to think of what the bottom would look like where would the lines all meet? Okay, on the stem, this is the fun part. Once it's the shape you want it, use a carving tool. So you could use a needle tool, you could use the shish kebab stick like I'm using, you could even use a pencil. And I'm gonna carve in those lines, and that's the only texture in my pumpkin besides the smooth orange skin? Rind? I don't know what the word is, the outside of the pumpkin. So you can see it's still a little messy. I should probably wash my hands, and it would be easier to carve if I let it sit in front of a fan for a little bit, or I wrapped it up in a bag and worked on it tomorrow. But I want this done today, so I'm going for it. Nice. Okay, so now I'm kind of pushing down on the top. I'm inspired by those like mini pumpkins that you can get at the grocery store. I used to beg my mom for those when I was a kid, and some of them are white, which is really cool. And so at this stage, it looks like a pumpkin. My lines are in there, and I'm just being really picky about how it looks. If I want my pumpkin to be a little squattier or a little bit more round, it's totally up to the style that you're interested in. The cool thing about pumpkins is they're very recognizable, but there's also a lot of different sizes and shapes of pumpkins out there. Still loving the sponge. It's just such an easy way to get smooth line. And it'd be really cool at this phase, you could make it a jack-o'-lantern. So you could carve a face in there, you could score, slip, and blend little facial features. I'm keeping mine very fall-like and simple, but I'm just thinking of how much fun I could have with this. So a final step is I'm going to poke 3 holes because I'm a little obsessive and one just doesn't seem enough in the bottom so it does not explode in the kiln. I was always taught that any hollow container of air would explode in the kiln, but I'm a member of this ceramics Facebook group and there was a lot of debate about that, but I'm still poking the hole in there because I don't want this to be a grenade. So I feel happy with the texture. I've got my air hole so it doesn't explode, and after a few days when it's completely dry, I'm going to put it in the kiln so it goes from clay to ceramics. Check this out. So because clay turns into a really hard substance when fired in the kiln, it makes a really cool musical instrument. Now that it's all finished, now I get to decide how to decorate it. And I picked watercolor paint because it's super cheap, super easy, and it looks really good fast. Obviously, I want my pumpkin orange. So I'm starting with the basics, and yes, I'm doing this fast. Remember, I'm double timing it, so this video is twice the speed as I worked in real life. So I'm putting 1 layer of orange paint. Watercolor is really great for clay because clay, when it's bisqueware, so that's when it's been in the kiln once, is really thirsty. So it's just absorbing that water. It is just absorbing the pigment or color of the paint. Now you could use acrylic paint, you could do oil pastels and watercolor, you could do metallic dry brush, or you could do glazing. I have a really nice glaze and it's actually called pumpkin. So if I had the time, I could totally glaze this. But this is a great technique because it's so inexpensive and you can also create really lifelike paintings with it. So for now, I'm just doing a solid orange and I can put as many layers on it until I feel like it's the right richness. You'll see I also put orange on the handle or stem, and now I'm overlapping with brown. Do you see how the brown is seeping down into the cracks? That was kind of a happy accident because I want it to look like it has a shadow. That's why I like to paint my clay, because I have so much more control over how it looks. So I'm doing just a little bit of brown in the cracks and a little bit of brown on the top section too. And this is going to make it look really three-dimensional. If you add too much, just water it down with your brush and spread it out, and a little bit of orange paint on top will cover up anything that looks a little too dark. But I don't want it like fluorescent orange. I want it to look like a pumpkin. They'd be growing outside. So you can see how much brighter it gets putting that second coat of orange. Now I could certainly stop here, but I love to paint. So I want to kind of play around with layering some more colors like this yellow. So I'm adding yellow to the high or raised areas of my pumpkin. This is totally optional. You can see the orange is so much more dominant, but this yellow paint, I feel like gives it just a little bit more complexity in its color. So work at your skill level, work where you feel comfortable, but I really like how that yellow just kind of warms things up. I'm putting a little bit of black, oops, it's dripping down, in the stem because see how it goes in that texture? Doesn't that look nice? I want it to really amp up. And if you have too much, use your water on your brush or a paper towel to pull any extra paint. So I'm going to go in with some red as well, and I'm going to put some red on the top so that it has like a dark area on top and then it fades to kind of that more yellow orange where it sticks out. And I could really do this all day. So paint to your comfort level, paying attention to making dark areas, making light areas, or just making it the orange that you would like it. There's really no way to mess it up. Worst case scenario, I'll let it dry and paint over it. So this is a really nice watercolor effect, and I am putting some green in the stem too because I felt like the brown was a little boring. So I think the green just livened it up, make it look a little bit more lifelike. And it dries very matte. So it dries not shiny because it's watercolor. Also, if you don't seal it with a gloss coat, anytime you spill water or put it near water, it's going to reactivate the paint. So although I don't mind how it looks, I took it outside and sprayed it with a clear gloss coat, and look how shiny it is. So I'm so happy with how this turned out. I feel like if I put it on a shelf or put it in a basket, it would just be the perfect fun fall decoration and musical instrument. Thank you so much for sticking around and making art with me. And if you're interested in more clay tutorials, check these out and check my description box for plenty of options if you don't want to paint with watercolor. I've got you covered.